Good afternoon and welcome to Rubbin Minds. My name is Isabella Adediji. You'll agree that every single government that comes into power always promises to fight that one thing that has been holding Nigeria back from achieving her full potential. I'm talking about corruption. But how do we tackle the problem of corruption? Is it by strengthening our institutions, by creating the right checks and balances, or is it by reforming the justice system? There are many solutions that have been preferred. But for us to discuss the issue of corruption and looking at accountability of the Nigerian government and its people, I have with me in the studio an attorney in the person of Okenna Nnebedum.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Rubbin Minds. And I also have a nation builder in the person of Joyce Daniels. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, let's go straight to it. Corruption. What do you think is the biggest cause of corruption? I'll start with you, Okenna.
Okay, I think the biggest cause of corruption or how it has come to fester in our country is because there are no consequences. That is what fertilizes.
So no repercussions.
No consequences. So we patronize politicians who are embedded or immersed in corruption. We have been taunted by Patrice Lumumba, who always, oftentimes when he gives his lectures and wants to refer to corruption in Nigeria, he says that when someone is found guilty of corruption in Senate crimes, the person is taken to jail. Well,
so there are repercussions. But some would say that the laws are there, but are they being enforced? I'd like to hear from you, Joyce. Do you agree that the biggest cause of corruption is the fact that there are no consequences, or are there consequences?
The biggest cause, in my opinion, is greed first. And then the fact that there are no consequences makes it proliferate. And yes, I do agree that we have laws. We're said to be one of the most legislated countries in the world. But the willpower to enforce the law is the challenge. I use a very basic system of corruption that we see almost every single day. When somebody puts a police officer in the front seat so they can drive what we call one way.
So that's very tempting when you see the traffic.
Breaking the law. So when the people in the place of protecting the law break the law, what's left?
It's interesting that you use that example because I know it's not just politicians. Some people.
It's not.
So are we saying that the corruption problem is all of us that's responsible?
All of us as people. Every single one, from the parent who asks the teacher to support the child trying to write common entrance exams, to the friend who says to another friend, help me now, I know say my own no complete, or I don't have my 5 papers complete, but just push my name. Everyone is involved in one way or the other. And I say everyone very carefully, knowing full well that there are people in every sector of the Nigerian economy who have never been involved in one form of corruption or the other.
Okay, I'd like to move the conversation to what can be done, because every government comes in and says they're going to tackle corruption. Are we looking at enforcing laws? Are we looking at stiffer penalties? Or are we looking at maybe a change of a mindset of every single Nigerian, that corruption becomes such a thing? You have countries like, say, Singapore, where if you're found wanting of corruption, some people would actually commit suicide because there's so much shame attached to corruption.
Yes, I think it all encompasses the list you have given to the extent that it must have to start from someone. And our mindset here is that once it involves someone from a particular region, you see people flying up, narratives, throwing up narratives on their social media and saying that it is because of this, it's because the person is that, It's because oftentimes we have lost our moral values. And to some extent, we don't even consider the fact that it degrades us as humans. In Japan, if you don't steal, it is not because there are no laws or because their enforcement will catch you, but it's because they have the philosophy that it degrades them as persons. And that's why they don't steal. Not because the law will catch up with you. So we still have to go through that evolution, reinvent our moral ethos as a people, and stop patronizing, stop compromising, and stop taking advantage of corrupt practices to the extent that when it favors you, like you said, it favors you at a point, it is no corruption. If it doesn't favor you, you raise your voice and your volume so high.
Okay. A lot of people will say that the leadership should be exemplary. That if we see our leaders sitting up, then the average Nigerian will say, okay, yes, I should also sit up as well. But there's that sense that the leaders are very corrupt, get away with misappropriating funds, and then someone that's maybe, say, the layman gets charged of a crime, and before you know it, there are stiff penalties. So do you feel that the leaders, because of the influence they wield, the change should start with them?
Definitely. Most definitely. Unfortunately, we as mere mortals who are not in places and seats of authority can only hold our leaders accountable to an extent until the more critical mass of us get involved in trying to hold people accountable, leaders accountable. Till then, I agree with him. It's back to us to put knives to our throats and keep our appetites for doing what is wrong to the barest minimum, or to zero if we can. I would see, the truth is, we've had a few examples of leaders who tried to put themselves in order, and it trickled down to some people around them. It was easier to sanitize the system when they themselves were examples. So in that regard, it must start from leadership.
So, okay, now what should this government be doing? Is it from the body language? Is it from holding people responsible and making, should I say, scapegoats of certain people to almost wake people up? Is that what we should be expecting from this government?
Oh, yes. I think they have started on a good note. One of the strongest government personalities in charge of our treasury is with the CSS as we speak. And it should go beyond the media razzmatazz. We anticipate that it is needless to have gone to arrest him. If we had invited him, he would have been there. But we try to, make a mountain out of a molehill, highly sensationalized, to the extent that when eventually, upon interrogations right now, you see the momentum will die down.
So what should be done to sustain that momentum? Because if today is going after, say, the CBN governor, we know that there are certain past government officials that also have questions to ask. As is the usual practice, once someone leaves government, the next thing is the EFCC comes knocking at their door. So should we expect to see more of that? And what can be done to sustain that momentum? I'd like your view on that, Joyce.
Personally, if you ask me, I'm not too keen of arresting the people of the past, even though there's its role to play. I'm more interested in seeing how the people in government now will live their lives. Very close to corruption, closest to corruption is the high cost of governance. So when we see flamboyance in the face of difficulty, it will trigger even more negative reactions by citizens who might begin to practice corruption just to fight back, as it were. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's a negative cycle. So I want to see where cost of governance is dropped. The other day I was watching on TV, and a governor was coming back to his state. And I mean, the entire cabinet was at the airport to receive him. He flew a private jet. We are not monarchs in Nigeria. We are a democracy in a broke country. So I'm wondering, what is the reason why all these people fueling all these vehicles, paying all this and leaving work to welcome a governor back who went to Abuja, back to his state, a less than 1 hour flight? We need to see costs dropped. We need to see things being done tidily. We need to see...
And I think that ties into the issue of accountability, because I remember seeing a video on social media that really gladdened my heart, and it was a Nigerian who had, in her morning walk, had seen, I believe it was the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and there was no entourage, and he was going for maybe an appointment, and after that he was going to work. So if we are saying as people that the government is spending a lot of money doing its work, how can we hold them accountable to say, okay, can we find ways to cut down the cost? I mean, the president just got approval for 20 special advisors. Does he need 20 special advisors?
Well, talking about that, I want to say that oftentimes, beyond what happens in Abuja, there are multiplicities of the same that happens in 36 states of the federation.
And local governments.
And local governments. Can you imagine that even the governor or a government functionary has one who opens the door for him, and the one who opens the door for the governor or the government functionary has another person that opens the door for him? And oftentimes these people parade pieces of papers with letterhead of government offices, you know, appointing them as special assistants, special assistants, senior special assistants, without portfolios, without offices. They hover around. I have them in my place.
And without job descriptions.
In the private sector, you have KPIs at the end of the year, or periodically you're being reviewed, and if there's no need for your role, then you're either made redundant or found a different job.
Profligacy she's talking about in government places. Oftentimes, employment are not tied to KPIs. They are not tied to any specific function. They're just hangers-on that come to the airport to sing
tied to
praise.
Political rewards.
Okay.
Exactly.
Joyce, do you think civil society organizations are doing enough to open our eyes and to hold government accountable?
Civil society organizations are trying. So many of them are trying. Are we also listening? Are we believing? Are we trying? So you see, I always like to say it's work for everybody. A lot of civil society organizations are trying. Fix Politics, an organization I belong to, is trying. We are always enlightening citizens, individuals, and I can mention other names. Truth be told, if we all as a collective don't have the will to act, then we will keep talking without seeing anything change. Does a president or a governor need 20 special advisors? In my personal opinion, I don't think so. But I always say, until we get into certain offices, maybe we don't know. Maybe there's some advice we need in there. I think, because I mean, we're enlightened enough to be able to figure out some of these things. You might need 10, and depending on what exactly they're advising you on, because they're also heads of these different MDAs. So, in a nutshell, everyone. So those of us who are not in government, those of us who run our private businesses or wherever we are, I'm asking, are we also conscious of how we live our lives? Do we have PAs to PAs to TAs who do not much more than boosting our egos and making us feel like we have arrived? So everyone needs to check everyone's
show of power. I think we're not talking about technology, and in a lot of developed climes, we see technology holding government accountable. People can go onto websites and see for themselves, without any interference, the numbers. They can see government spending. They can see the budget. So what can we do to start adopting e-governance? Is it something that we need to get involved with the legislative arms? Is it something that we need to also call on civil society organizations to help push those messages? What can we do to adopt technology to strengthen that anti-corruption drive?
You remember this administration that just left, they came in with the mantra, Treasury single account. And with all the noise about the Treasury single account, you still have the Federal Inland Revenue guilty today of non-remittance, totally. The Nigerian Customs Service and the rest of them, or to an extent even entrenching 10% cut on costs of, remittances. And you ask yourself, what has got to do with Section 162 of the Constitution, which provides for direct remittance into the revenue account of the consolidated revenue account of the federal government for all these MDAs. But the enforcement is zero. They will frustrate it. How would you explain to people in the future that sometime in the country called Nigeria, an Accountant General of the Federation had humongous amount of money, under corruption charges, and it was not able, the system was not able to detect such humongous amount of money? It's because technology is not being deployed, or where it is deployed, they are sabotaged. Because
I know if you're trying to solve a case, if you watch a lot of these maybe crime channels or they always say follow the money. So how can we follow the money? A new government has come in. How can they know? And not just at the top, like you said, but state governments, local governments. How can we go back to our own different constituencies and say, okay, you're the local government chairman, I want to see your budget. I want to see how the funds are being expended. I pay tax, so I should have a right to see how public resources are being used.
Two things are very important. Number one, let's also remember that let's be able to see our growth. Now we have people like Budget who always show us what's happening with the budget and where things are being misappropriated, and they speak out on social media and mass media, and sometimes the uproar is so much we see some things being adjusted here and there. So let's acknowledge that we are making progress in these regards. Two, technology is frightening to some people of a certain age. And these people make up the large majority of the civil service today. Let's also acknowledge the big challenges to technology. You even find some people who are 50 plus who find it difficult to use what we call WhatsApp, right? So when you now say, put this file here, sometimes it's not because they don't want to, it's because they're afraid of it. They're not even sure, so they're afraid of mistakes. And you know, we're in a society where blame game is very, very rife. So we should acknowledge, number two is we should acknowledge the challenges and mitigate them one after the other. In a state like mine, Edo State, I'll proudly say that e-governance is making inroads because our governor is intentional about driving it. It has not been the easiest thing, and it will never be the easiest thing. Development is not the easiest thing, but it should be consistent. Communication with the people who we need to be orientated, what's that correct English? Orientated? Needs to continue on every front. You know, they will say speak in the language that people dream in. So after saying it in English, say it in Pidgin, say it in the local language, until people begin to understand and imbibe. And it cannot be only for government. It's for those of us in media. It's for those of us in the religious spaces, because many people take their dressing more from religious organizations than even from anything we're saying here.
Yes, and even traditional rulers as well.
So
and
it's a complete cycle. Everybody needs to work together.
And that brings in the issue of education. How is our education system addressing this problem? Because you spoke about reorientation of our values. Are our children going to schools and they're learning about our values? Are they going to schools and they're learning about technology? Are they being equipped for work in the 21st century and beyond, when other climes are looking at artificial intelligence and augmented realities and all these technological achievements? So what can our education system do? Because it's now a multifaceted approach that is needed.
Talking about education, I remember when I was in 200 level, the law faculty, we were supposed to take a course, computer science. And do you know what the young man came teaching us? He came with logic gates. And I wondered to myself, what would logic, at that time too, technology was, just,
budding.
And then in my class, some of us had belonged to some clubs, the Rotaract and the rest of them. And some of us we've contested for SUGs, parliamentary seats and legislative seats, and we had been exposed to writing memos and doing bills at the legislature, particularly myself too. And then I have seen a computer, and have seen desktop publishing. I've gotten constant with the use of Microsoft Word and all those. So I was looking forward to the day the young man will come, and he came to class and said, logic gate. Started drawing some things on the board, and my friends were looking, and they said, okay, raise your hand, raise your hand. I got into trouble. When I raised my hand, I said...
So we'll have to we'll have to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll look at other solutions on education, as well as technology, and also rallying the people around to ensure that it's not just one person that's carrying this burden of anti-corruption. We'll go on a quick break now on Rubbin Minds. Join us again. welcome back to Rubbin Minds. Before the break, we're looking at corruption in Nigeria, the causes, the solutions, and generally the conversation on how this can just move from being a conversation to actually being practiced, being in action. How can we ensure that that anti-corruption drive does not just end on a show like this? We just talk. What can we do to move the needle forward? So we're looking at education just before we went on that break, and I wanted Joyce to weigh in on that. How can education be that tool?
Education can be the tool when we teach what corruption is not. Personally, I really don't like to use the word corruption. I hardly refer to it. I rather speak of loving your neighbor, doing for others the way you want to be done for you, being accountable to God, to your family, to your destiny, to yourself, right? Institutionalizing empathy. That's how our education system can help. When we teach our children to care for the person who is sitting next to them, when you teach your child who is doing so well to teach their colleague who is not doing well, rather than say, don't go and teach them, because they'll take the one you're teaching them plus the one the teacher is teaching, and then they'll do better than you. That's corruption. But I wouldn't use that word.
So
I would want us to teach what is not.
It's now showing it for what it is, and not just, a politician stole money. But corruption is happening at every level, from the family to the school to society. And we're now joined by Opeyemi Oke, a public analyst. Opeyemi, welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to move the conversation towards Democracy Day. We know that tomorrow is June 12, which is the new Democracy Day. In the past, we've had May 29 being celebrated as Democracy Day, but 24 years later, how would you rate our democratic growth in this year?
Thank you again for having me. Of course, it's 24 years of democracy. We are not where we want to be, but of course, we're not stagnant. We're getting better by the day. Electioneering process is improving. The citizenry is getting more aware of their rights, and the citizen government relations is getting better, at least better than we used to have it. So I can say that we are making progress. We're not where we are supposed to be, but we're not where we used to be. So there is something to celebrate being Democracy Day. I mean, yes.
Okay, now I would like to ask you about your assessment of democracy and looking at things like, say, press freedom, for example. Do you believe that we're in a city or a state or a country where I am guaranteed freedom of speech, where the where the journalists can go and ask the politicians questions without any fear of being witch hunted, where there's true press freedom?
Of course we do. I don't see any limitation except the fact that to some extent today, everyone is a journalist because of the handheld devices we hold. And we begin to push out narratives, push out messages, copy, paste, and keep on spreading without checking the source, without checking whether they're inflammatory, without verifying the source, without even checking whether it is going to, affect the other person because of some context. In fact, there are a wide latitude between libel and all those information that just gets out to. That is where I believe there should be censored. But for the fact of getting into a room or stopping a politician anywhere and asking questions, the press has always had the freedom.
Joyce, I'd like to ask you, as a nation builder, an active citizen, do you feel that you can reach out to any Nigerian leader, any head of a government, maybe MDA, and you'll be giving audience? Do you believe that you can send them a tweet and they will respond? Has that been the case in your nation building?
I do believe I can try. Now, I am averse to labeling everyone the same. I have tried to reach out to a few people at different times and I got good responses on time. Some never responded. So the person matters. Some people are nation building minded as well, regardless of positions they occupy. So yes, I do believe that I should try. I should not try because I don't know how I'll be responded to. It takes courage for citizens to even try to hold leaders accountable. It takes courage and good sense. I didn't say common sense, good sense. curated sense to know what kinds of questions to ask and to know how to control emotions when we want to ask questions and why we even want to ask questions. Do we want to ask questions just so we know, oh, I talked to this person, or is there a place we're driving to? What's the end of that proposed conversation? So it's not a very simple yes and no. It's depending on all the 5 W's and 1 H. Why, who, when, where, what, and how.
Okay, I'll ask Okpeyemi. You know, there was a time when Twitter was banned, and for a lot of the young people who use that social media, it was almost seen as a silencing of their voices, that, oh, this government doesn't want to listen to us, and that's why they've removed one channel. Do you feel, because I have my guest here, Okena, saying that with everybody becoming a citizen journalist, how do we draw that fine line between spreading of fake news, but also ensuring that our citizens are free to express themselves?
Yes, freedom of expression or freedom of speech is a basic and fundamental right of every citizen of any country. However, it is important that, the guest in the studio said, that we need to have continuous engagement. I see what civil society organizations have been doing in terms of sensitizing the people of how governance work, how to verify information before you spread them. However, I believe that, yes, we should have all of the internet, but there must be ethical use of these tools. You know, image is everything. Brandishing Nigeria the way we do on Twitter or on the internet space, you know, has not really done well for us as a country. You know, so I believe that as much as I believe that the government needs to do a lot better in terms of engaging the citizenry better, especially the youth population who are, you know, the Twitter people, right? I also believe that the citizenry has a responsibility both to themselves and to their nation. So we need to, at the grassroots level, at every opportunity we get, it's not just the work of the government, civil society organizations. You know, Joyce was talking about education earlier. We need to do all of that so that we can actually have like a reasonable middle ground where both the desires of the citizenry and the expectations of the government is met. Yes.
Okay, is that collective effort? Now, we say democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. But when we look at the population of Nigeria, we have a high percentage, about 50% of women. We have people who are living with disabilities, and yet we're asking for an inclusive government. When we look at the current makeup, you can count on your fingers the number of elected female representatives. Joyce, what can be done to ensure that this democracy that we're saying is truly representative of people like you and I?
Isabella, there's a lot to do. 2 things. I always like to say 2 things that can be done. Number 1 is intentional, holistic engagement with men and women from a cultural point of view. We are in a patriarchal society. In my hometown today, at a community meeting, women are not allowed to speak. So putting a woman from that midst into a leadership position is almost not going to happen. So if we continue to engage, remember, time, where, when, how. I think it will take some time, but it's already in motion. So we should also recognize that, but continue. I had said 2 things. That's number 1. Second thing is, for this dispensation with the last elections, overall, we had more women being sworn in than the last administration. I always like to say, count my blessings, not my troubles. Today we have a few more women. We have 7 deputy governors, and the numbers that are being sworn in into the National Assembly and state houses of assembly. And then we now ask, we do the black box thinking. What happened this time? We had fewer women come out to run, but we have more women being sworn in. So what changed? If we can go back and point out to 1 or 2 things, which I believe we would find, then we can continue to replicate.
Okay, now, should we be looking at things like affirmative action?
Affirmative action on itself does not put the votes higher. What makes your vote count higher is competence. I think women are very competent people, multitasking by creation. Multitasking. I don't want to go into that. Pastors will do better than myself. But I say it, that women are not coming to compete with men. They are coming to complement and even take over. Take the nursing profession, take our own profession. There are more female magistrates and female judges than there are men. They are taking over everywhere. Why? Competence. And if you now get into elective positions are not like those appointments. They are quite different. They have cultural limitations.
Yeah.
We are Africa. These things have to evolve. It mustn't be automatic. You understand the way the society looks at it in the first place, is even that this person who is always following politicians overnight and all their meetings and doing that. You see, there is always that question mark. But they will go beyond, they break the ceiling and then get into it with competence. And you will see, when you create an alternative, view, and then bring up yourself with what I have done before. It's a Nigerian woman that is heading the World Trade Organization. And she has a track record. It can be replicated. And I know very few women who are even towing that line, rather than go to ask for it like, I demand for this position. Nobody can give it to you by affirmative action. But even at that too, the Not Too Young to Run Act has even helped people too. The same way I believe affirmative action is complementary, but not mandatory. It's not even enforceable to go and tell a governor that because of affirmative action, and I sue you to court and then I ask you to even appoint. Are those people competent? If they are, there will be no question for who will be voted for.
Okay. Okpeyemi, I'd like you to tell us what you think needs to be done in this critical time in ensuring that our democracy evolves with the times. We're looking at a time of a lot of technological improvement, a time where people are coming out. There's almost like an awakening in the citizenry when we look at the past election. So what can we do to ensure that that whole vigor that we saw actually translates to the voter sheet and beyond the election translates into that active citizenry where we're not just folding our hands and waiting for the next 4 years to say, okay, what are you promising? You want my vote. But how can we ensure that momentum that has been built will continue so that our democracy is strengthened?
Thank you. Like I said to some people, I was in the studio recently where I talked about, how we need to start thinking about 2027 already. We don't need to wait until 2 years before we start, thinking what is going to happen to Nigeria. I believe that the last general election, the 2023 general election, would has set a tone for a transformation in Nigeria. I love how the renewed hope, how President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approached democracy or governance since he came, the stakeholders approach. I mean, it's not game as usual. Nobody will ever have it as easy as any president has had it before in the past, because the citizenry they are better informed than we are woke, in our 21st century conversation. So I just believe that there needs to be continuous engagement. We need to hold our leaders accountable, even at the grassroots level. So beyond just the I no go agree, beyond just the protesting, the unconventional participation that we have chosen as citizenry in governance, we need to hold these people accountable at every level possible, at the grassroots level possible. I said during an interview recently, I also ran for House of Assembly in the last election, but I did not win. But one of the things that I've done is to start engaging with the man that won at my local constituency to say that, okay, these are the things I feel you can do. These are the things. So it becomes more collaborative for us to deliver good governance to the people. So warming up the 2027 election, every leader knows that he needs to perform. He or she needs to perform, to win the trust and to gain the trust of the people. So we
need to continue that conversation.
Education. Exactly. So we don't need to go back to the hustle. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. So that collaborative effort is something that has continued to reoccur in our conversation, that it's not just a one-sided thing. Everybody, almost like all hands have to be put on deck. Now, we know that the last elections, there was a lot of whipping of ethnic sentiment. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has come out to say that he's going to run a government for all. But what does that translate to beyond the president saying this? What does that mean on a state level? What does that mean on a local government level? How can we ensure that what happened at the polls does not repeat itself when we start looking at appointments, when we start looking at how we're running our businesses, how we're selecting the students that go into our schools and different facets of life?
There's a way I see Nigerians. So I see Nigerians as a very malleable people, the easiest country to govern in the world. You know why? We don't ask too much of our leaders. We don't hold them accountable. build road today, the same person who built the road that would have been used, that 2 billion could have done, and he built it with 8 billion. Nobody asks questions. If you try to ask questions, they will say, but you built the road now. You understand? So to that extent, I say that it is not about the vibes, the body language, the few 2 weeks of engagement and all that. It's a marathon. It's a 4-year thing. So we are looking at consistency, practicability, and oftentimes to an extent where the Constitution says wider representation, like the ministerial appointments, at least one from each state, let there be compliance. But I repeat, Nigerians behave like some of us when we enter the aircraft. We don't care to know the party of the pilot. We don't care to know the gender. We don't care to know so many things. All we know is that there are some standards that has been complied to. If the political class can deliver on democracy dividends, Nigerians don't have a problem.
Joyce, what would you say are some quick wins in the short term that we can see from government at all levels, and even from the people, that you believe that, okay, we're beginning to see the ship being steered in the right direction when it comes to protecting our democracy?
Some of us are still too hurt to see anything good. That's the truth. We feel our mandate was stolen at the presidential election. Our minds have not been changed. Some of us who have family here in Lagos saw what happened at the elections, especially in Lagos State. Our wounds are still very fresh. That's the truth. So when we see some things that look like wins, we are very skeptical, even to the point of cynicism, and saying, well, is this now the ends justifies the means? Call it what you want. We're in court. We still want several rulings to be had. The hurt is still very real for some of us to see anything that has happened as a quick win. We'll wait till 4 years, and let's see more.
I can hear you, and I hear what you're saying. And I have to think about the last elections on a state level, in a state like Lagos, where they're just looking at your facial features to see if you're from a certain...
Funny, you look Igbo, or you look...
I mean, some of us, we're mixed. My mom is Igbo, my dad is Yoruba, but by that I'm Yoruba, but I don't look Yoruba. So I can imagine people like me who showed up at the polls. But now you see maybe this law that is being considered at the Lagos State Assembly, almost Europe. Lagos is Lagos is no man's land. Those kind of laws, do they really protect the indigents, or do they add in whipping the ethnic sentiment?
For some of them, I really would say time will tell, because it's one thing to have law on paper, it's another thing to see goodwill in action, political will in action. So we've seen a lot of paper, we've seen a lot of legislation. Let's see action.
Even without their passing it, it has already, by the vibes going out, it has already contradicted the Chapter 4 of the Constitution, which guarantees our fundamental rights to live any place we seek to think about in the country, to pursue our business, and then to live and do business anywhere, make profit and go. Because sometimes, like you said, if you continue to throw up what happened in Lagos during the last election, it is the saddest point. It is it is very, very real.
Yeah.
Some people, whipped up sentiment to an extent, calling people Omo Ale, and then you think your children want to live in this society in the future. Some of them have Igbo wives, some of them have Igbo friends, some of them thrive in Igbo environment. The government itself, the kind of revenue they raise from Igbo clusters, business clusters, I don't think, so I don't want to think about, like you said, let's see what happens. Because it's dead on arrival.
Let me get Opeyemi to weigh in on this. And I would like you to, as we close this show, to let us, what will you be telling this government? What should this government be doing to protect that democracy? For some of us who grew up, our childhood was during the military era. And for some people, they don't realize what a democracy is. And you could say that there's not that much ginger, like to borrow local parlance, to protect this democracy. But what can this government do to ensure that what the people suffered, what June 12 stands for, is not lost?
Yes, I strongly hope, or have high hopes in renewed hope, that the government needs to listen to the people. The government must obey the rule of law. We must do that. We must obey the rule of law. We must listen to the people. We must fulfill on our promises. And we are highly diversified. We're a highly diversified country. And like never before, Nigeria needs a unifier. And I hope that this administration can embark on national unity and make sure that we find a way to coordinate our diversity to bring us rather closer, than pull us apart, as it did during the last election. Like Joy said, I mean, what happened in Lagos is really sad. I don't want to preempt Lagos State House of Assembly yet. I want to see how things pan out. We'll see. But however, the government needs to respect the rights of the citizenry. We must listen to the people. And of course, we need to obey the rule of law. It's critical. That is, by so doing, we can actually unify the country more and take advantage of our diversity to our advantage and not to pull us, further apart. So I'm
very much
that this government will do well.
Thank you very much, Okpe Yemi Oke, a public analyst, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds. And also thank you to Joyce Daniels, a nation builder, and attorney Okenna Nnebedum. Thank you for being on Rubbin Minds.
Thank you, Isabella. Thank you for having us.
And on that note, we wish you a happy Independence Day in advance. And please remember to engage as citizens. It doesn't stop at the top. Democracy is government of the people, for the people, by the people. My name is Isabella Adediji. Join us again on Rubbin Minds.